Hello everyone, welcome to Shonenflop Gaiden, the companion series to the podcast Shonenflop, and I'm your host, Tucker Whatley, and you might have noticed, we have a name now! That's right, this companion podcast has a name now. You've probably heard the word Gaiden before, but in case you haven't, Gaiden, it means side story in Japanese. The gai part means outside, it's the same gai in gaijin, and den is like a story or a transmission of information. If you could be familiar with it with the word Shippuden in Naruto, Shippuden. The Shippu means hurricane, by the way. So this podcast supplemental series is going to continue to be about a lot of language stuff, because that's stuff I'm very interested in. Been studying Japanese and other languages for a while now. But we're going to be delving into some other topics, especially in later episodes. I did not really have the opportunity, because of outside circumstances, to dive super duper hard this time in stuff outside of language. But in the future, expect this to cover a much wider range of topics. It's going to be like audio footnotes, but like with radical ninjas and stuff, man. And speaking of radical ninjas, we have a series that is about radical ninjas, not in the sense of radical meaning cool, but radical as in meaning, say, right-wing reactionaries. That's right, it is the right-wing Shonen Jump Flop Tokyo Shinobi Squad. Man, I had a hard time getting that one out. This series was done by the author Tanaka Yuki. Now his name is Tanaka, so Tanaka. Make sure you're not saying Tanaka. Remember in Japanese that none of the syllables receive stress, are not stressed any more than the other ones, and that a at the end is going to remain an a, not like an like we want to give it. So it's Tanaka and Yuki. That is long, and Yuki means like courage, so Tanaka Yuki. If you're going to do a correct pronunciation on it, if you do a short Yuki like that, it means snow, so you want to give it Yuki. The art was done by Matsuura Kento. Matsuura Kento. The big thing to look out for that is that the Matsu and Ura are separate, so it's Matsuura. It's not Matsuura, it's Matsuura. So the Matsu means pine tree, and Ura means like beach or coast or something like that. In Tokyo Shinobi Squad, the main power that everyone uses is called ninpo. I couldn't find how this was written in Japanese, but something to keep in mind is that whenever the sound in appears before a P or a B, basically that in sound turns into an M. And I could go into why it does that linguistically. I'll hold back right now, but just know that whenever you see like an in appearing before a P or a B in Japanese, even though it's written as an N, even when you're writing stuff out in English, it's usually pronounced more as an M sound. So N-I-N-P-O would be pronounced ninpo. That in becomes so ninpo. It's similar to what happens if you know the Japanese word senpai, that it's usually spelt S-C-N-P-A-I, but usually pronounce it senpai. Same thing happening there. And I don't know how ninpo is written, but I'm guessing that the nin at the beginning of it is probably the same kanji from ninjutsu, which means, like, the nin means, like, secret or concealed or spy. But that's just me guessing. I don't know for sure. Next, we have the protagonist, Narumi Jin. Narumi Jin. Not super hard. Thing to keep in mind is that the Jin is not Jin, it's Jin. And to avoid the temptation to say Narumi, it's Narumi, not Narumi. So make sure you're doing na, and make sure that you're not giving stress onto the R part. Narumi, not Narumi. Next, we're delving into some non-Japanese stuff, which is fun. I like it when we switch it up every once in a while. And we got some French! So we have a character named Papillon. Papillon. This is the French word for butterfly. It's the supermodel character. And French pronunciation is quite difficult. And I can't go into way too much detail. I'll probably go into more detail if we ever cover a series that's mostly or all French characters in it. I'm sure we can find some, or characters with French names. But man, this is so different from Japanese that it is difficult to say. But what you need to know about papillon is, I believe I've mentioned this in the past, but that O-N at the end of it, on, whenever you see an N at the end of a syllable in French, it doesn't actually correspond to the consonant N. It did many, many hundreds of years ago, but what it means now, if there isn't another vowel after it, if it's just an N at the end of a syllable, it means that you don't pronounce that N, but it means that the previous syllable is nasalized, which means that in addition to air is coming out of your mouth, escaping through your mouth, and producing sound that way, there is simultaneously air coming out of your nose at the same time, which changes the tone of the sound, similar to a mute on a trumpet or a trombone. So, this O-N is like an O sound. You could just like make an O vowel, but as you're saying that, make it so that air is also coming out of your nose. So a good way to practice that is to go back and forth between the nasal and non-nasal version of the vowel to get a sense for what the two feel like differently. So, oh. Notice I go from oh like that. So sliding back and forth between those two related sounds will give you a good sense for how that feels. Another thing is the double L thing. Two L's by each other in French can mean several things in different contexts, but here it is pretty much a Y sound. You know how in Spanish you have like tomatillo and stuff like that have two L's that has a Y-like sound? It's not exactly like an English Y, it's kind of a little bit different, but if you want to just approximate it, do a good approximation of it, substituting a Y sound in there is not a bad idea. That's pretty much acceptable. You'll sound very close, pretty close to what it should sound like. And of course the PA is pa, just a pa sound, similar to what it sounds like in Japanese. So it's papillon. And keep in mind, another thing about French pronunciation is that, like Japanese, none of the syllables will get extra levels of stress. No syllable is stressed. That's actually a really common misconception among English-speaking people, that French, that you give the stress on the final vowel. That is actually completely wrong. It basically comes from the fact that whenever we hear French, we're so used in our normal speech hearing English words that have the first sound stressed, or the second to last sound stressed, like things coming from Spanish and Italian. We're so used to that whenever we hear things that are totally neutral, that have no variant levels of stresses, that we automatically feel that the final syllable is stressed, because we have a tendency in English to de-stress the final syllable. So a lot of the stereotypical cartoon racist chef accent doesn't actually sound the way that French people speak at all. Like, compare some of those like cartoony accents to actual audio of French people speaking French, or even French people like speaking English. It doesn't sound anything like that at all. It's kind of astounding, like, how far the stereotypical French accent has drifted from what the real thing actually sounds like. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent right now, but you should know that whenever you actually speak words in French, don't put on that fake, cartoon accent like that. Don't do that. It's wrong. It's straight up wrong. It's just a made up thing that no one actually sounds like. So make sure when you're speaking French words and French names, don't sound like that. So keep in mind, equal levels of stress. We have that nasalized O sound, and we have the Y sound in the middle of it. So it's papillon, papillon, papillon. Not that hard. It sounds weird. There's a lot harder stuff in French. French pronunciation can be quite difficult sometimes. Grammatically, it's far, far easier than Japanese, but pronunciation-wise, it can be tricky sometimes. And next we have N. Just N. No, Jordan, not ein. It's not German, it's N. But it's hard to fault you very much because I tried to look up what the heck is going on with this name. It's supposed to be Thai. Apparently the character keeps saying that they're Thai over and over again, but I don't know where the name comes from. I looked into the original Japanese. It's just spelled out in katakana as N. It's just E-N-N. And I looked up stuff on encyclopedias of Thai names for babies, naming if you want to give your baby a Thai name. I looked that up and I could not find it anywhere, and I can't find any reference to any person with that name. So I really have no idea what the author was going for with that. Did they just make it up? Did they know of some Thai person? Or I don't know. I really have no idea what's going on with it, and it totally stumped me. But knowing how super xenophobic this author is, I would sincerely doubt they did a lot of in-depth research on it, more than I would. I mean, really, let's be serious now. I would be shocked if this is something thought out and respectful to Thai culture. Just shocked. So, it's written as N in Japanese, so that's what I would call it. Not ein. But I really have no idea what's up with this. And here in the home stretch, we are returning to the world of Japanese with the name Shimizu Taiga. Shimizu Taiga. Shimizu Taiga. This one isn't very hard. Remember your stresses. It's Shimizu, not Shimizu. And of course, the Taiga comes from the English word for tiger. That is not the Japanese word for tiger. The Japanese word for tiger is Tora, as heard in the title of the film, the World War II film, Tora, Tora, Tora. You should remember that the ga at the end stays ga, doesn't become ga. So it's Taiga, Taiga, 3 syllables. So Shimizu Taiga. Apparently the dude really likes tigers or has tiger power or something, I don't know. And finally, we have Oniwa Kenryu. Oniwa Kenryu. And this one is a little bit harder. The RY sounds in Japanese tend to give people difficulty because it's just so different from what we have in English. And so people like to say Ryu and stuff like that. But the RY thing it really is a consonant into of itself, pretty much, or something like that. The thing to keep in mind is that R, the thing you see portrayed usually with the Roman letter R, doesn't actually correspond to a consonant sound that is anything like the R sound we make in English. It is actually probably closer to an L-ish sound, but it's kind of neither. And keep in mind, it's less of a sort of thing and more of an exact consonant, like da, like that, da. So having a Y sound coming after that, because you're used to doing stuff like gu, news, and stuff like that, and Q. You're adding Y stuff. Those aren't multiple syllables. That's one syllable, one vowel sound in English. We're used to doing that, but we don't really have the RY thing like that in English like they do in Japanese. But just keep in mind that it is a thing like Q. So it's Oniwa Kenryu, Ryu. So ri, practice doing ri, ryu. Yeah, it's difficult. It takes some work getting used to. And also, make sure with this name that you are pronouncing the wa at the end of Oniwa and not saying Oniwa. I feel like I'm saying that a lot. But people, it's a common mispronunciation because in English we tend to de-emphasize our final vowels, which then changes the value of the vowel to a schwa. I could go into complicated. I'll keep out the complicated linguistic stuff right now. But yeah, it's ironic that the way that a English-speaking person would mispronounce this is actually much more complicated linguistically than the original. But yeah, Oniwa Kenryu. Oniwa Kenryu. Kainen Yu. That Kainen Yu is 2 syllables. And that does it for Shonenflop Gaiden for Tokyo Shinobi Squad. So it was a pretty short and very language-focused episode, but given all the crazy stuff that's been happening this week, I'll hope you'll forgive me for that. In the future, I'd like to dig more into some additional aspects of the series that are being examined by Shonenflop, also so I can provide some more background for the guys during their episode. Hope you all look forward to it. In the meantime, you can catch all my internet stuffs by going to my Twitter at Tucker Whatley, TuckerWhatley, no punctuation. And you can find a portfolio of some stuff I've been doing around here online, some published work at tuckerwhatley.com, TuckerWhatley.com. See you, Space Cowboy. Stay safe out there, everyone.